For this morning, I asked Alan Perez to share a few experiences of his recent month-long trip on the East Coast as it relates to this time that we've all been in since October 7th.
Hey, thank you, Rabbi, and Shabbat Shalom. We had a little bit of confusion. Rabbi, after he asked me, sent me a text message, which I interpreted as being, I asked you, but I'm going to give a sermon. He's going to give a sermon, and I wasn't going to have to do my thing. And I found out, nope, I'm still going to do my thing. So I didn't have my notes, so I'll do my best. Ryan and I recently took a trip to the Mid-Atlantic states, and it was going to be a history trip and a trip to see a lot of friends. And we didn't expect it to have any real Jewish content. Unlike our spring trip where we went to Europe, where, as those of the Minyan know, everywhere we turned, there was Jewish content. But this trip had a lot of surprises, a lot of Jewish surprises, and I'm going to give you a flavor for what happened. And it was just so important for this time of our lives and history. As you know, the portion today is talks about Jacob's travels from Beersheba to Haram. And I said to myself, gee, how far is that? And I looked it up, and it's about the distance from Washington, D.C. to Cincinnati. It's about 450 miles. And so if you're walking 8 hours a day, how long would that take? It would take you about 21 or 22 days, which was about how long our road trip was. So I thought, there you go. There's number one. The number one coincidence. Anyway, we left Chicago and we went to, our first stop was in Pittsburgh to see our good friends Bryce and Arlene Palchek, who some of you may remember. They were members here. They left, I don't know, about 30 years ago, for Bryce's job. And you know, they took us around, showed us a lot of Pittsburgh. And one of the places that they took us to was Squirrel Hill, which is a Jewish community in Pittsburgh. Unlike many big cities, the Jewish community didn't leave the area that they had always been in, but stayed in Squirrel Hill. And they drove us by the Tree of Life Synagogue. And it really like hit you in the gut, because here you have a big building, no life, surrounded by fences, and no one goes in, no one comes out. All the important things that happened there don't happen anymore. Well, when we left Pittsburgh and we're on the road, you know, to pass the time, we were listening to some podcasts. And one of the podcasts that I listen to regularly is from the AJC. And they had a 4-part series about Pittsburgh and the aftermath of the Tree of Life. One of the episodes was an interview with son and daughter-in-law of one of the women who was killed. Turns out that that woman is a sister of a friend of ours in Toronto. So we heard it with exceptional interest. And one of the things that they did, and I'm sorry, let me kind of step back. They talked about their mother and how important life at the synagogue was. And one of the things they talked about was the importance of their daily minyan to her. And it really, again, was like a punch in the gut, because one of the things that I missed on our trip was the meaning and the support, particularly after October 7th. But one of the things that they did to honor their mother was created an organization to promote Jewish families to invite non-Jews to their seders and to their Shabbat meals. And Ryan and I talked to one another, looked at one another and said, we've been doing that for years. We should up our ante and figure out how to do more of it. And it's going to be an important theme at the very end of what I have to say. So off we went to Maryland to visit Raya's brother and sister-in-law, who are hoping to make Aliyah soon. And we went to the Holocaust Museum, and they had an exhibit. And we weren't planning on doing this, but we went to the Holocaust Museum, and they had an exhibit about what did America know about the Holocaust, going back to the very beginning of the rise of the Nazis. One of the things that struck me was an information placard that the America First movement, which was all about isolationism and anti-Semitism, had its start at Yale. And I thought back to the stories, or the news reports rather, about what's going on at Harvard, at other Ivy League schools, and at many colleges and universities around the country. And that wasn't our only visit in Washington. We'll come back. We go off to Fredericksburg, Virginia, to visit a friend. We drive up to their house. There's a house across the street flying an Israeli flag. And it was like, whoa, this is like in the middle of no place, an Israeli flag. That we're so excited. So a couple of days later, we had an opportunity to go over and introduce ourselves to the people who live there, and because we wanted to say thank you for the support, because it was a very lonely time. So we went over and we knocked on the door, and an older woman came to the door with her grandson. It was a multi-generational family. And we said, we noticed the flag, and she said, they're a Christian family, not particularly religious, but they're Christian, but they know history. And they don't understand what's going on, why the world has turned against Israel and the Jews. And, she had this flag. Her daughter, who lived in a nearby town, also flew an Israeli flag. And, we were just so moved. We thanked her and her family for their support. And it just was the first really important moment in our trip. From there, while we were there, we did some side trips. We went to Richmond, Virginia. We went to the Confederate White House. We got there. There's a young man manning the information and ticket booth, and we got talking, and Raya said, are you a college student? Virginia Commonwealth University is there. He said, yes. She said, and Raya, she's very direct, very probing. She said, kind of what's going on campus about Israel and Palestine? And he said, I think in part because there was nobody else around, that he was Jewish. His name was Tyler. Who would think a guy named Tyler would be Jewish? But he said, I'm Jewish. And he told us kind of what was happening. We talked about in general, kind of Israel and Gaza. And he gave us some things to see in Jewish Richmond. So if you are ever in Richmond, go visit Temple Ahaba, which dates to 1910. It's got an amazing history, wonderful stained glass windows. It's a Reformed congregation that has its origins back in like 1789 with a Sephardic Orthodox congregation. They also have, but I think they're closing, a little museum about life in Richmond, and they don't make light of the fact that there were Jewish slave owners, there were Jewish Confederate soldiers. They were part of the community, and they supported, many of them, not all of them, supported the Confederacy. But there were also families that were torn apart because some stayed loyal to the Union while others went with the Confederacy. From Fredericksburg, and I'm going to kind of try to make this short, we went on and continued our visit, did things like Monticello, which, by the way, wouldn't be what it is today if a Jewish family hadn't bought it while it was in ruins and started restoring it. We left Monticello to come home, and we wanted to, wait a minute, I am missing a piece. Well, we'll kind of skip over. Oh, we left Charlottesburg, and off we drove, a long drive, on our way to Shipshewana, Indiana, because we wanted to visit the Amish country, which we had visited like 30 years ago when our daughter Beth was young. We stopped in a town called Breezeport, Pennsylvania, which I think only exists because it's a truck stop, or that's the way it seems. There may be a real town there, but it seems to be all around trucks and the highway and stuff. We went for breakfast at the only place we could find that was open, which was a Bob Evans, up on a hill, the only thing you could see. We had breakfast, we came out, and in walks a woman with a sweatshirt with a big green logo that looked to me like Starbucks. So I jokingly said to her, "Oh, you're wearing a Starbucks logo and you're coming into Bob Evans?" Well, that opened up a whole big conversation. She said, "Oh, it's not, Starbucks, it's her. She used the Starbucks idea and she developed her own thing." But for some reason, she opened up to us. She said, "I'm an artist, but unlike most artists that are liberal, I'm pretty conservative. And I'm religious and read the Bible." And I thought, where are we going? Where are we going to be going with this conversation? But she said to us, without any prompting, without any idea of who we were, she said, I don't understand, why there isn't more support for Israel. And with what's going on in Gaza. And we said, "Well, by the way, we're Jewish," and got it, so we started talking about Judaism and Christianity, even though she said she wasn't that religious or outwardly religious or with organized religion. But, she was a real ally. She said, there's this word, and she was reaching for a word. She pulled out her phone and she looked it up, and it was kavanah. And so we kind of explained what it was. And we said, by the way, we had just come back from the March for Israel. And she was just so excited about that. finally pulled ourselves away because we had 7-hour drive ahead of us and it was getting late. Back to the car, Raya said, how about we give her one of the Israeli flags that we have and one of the t-shirts that we have? And I said, that's great. So Raya brought it into the restaurant, gave it to the woman. She broke out in tears. She was just so touched and so excited. So off we go on our trip to Shipshawana. We had made arrangements to stay on a farm owned by a Mennonite family. We get there, it's after dark, the wife greets us. We were staying in a small separate building. It was sort of like a B&B, but where we stayed was separate from their house, but it was a working farm. And, she said to us, in the morning, if you want, my husband will take you for a ride on the combine and walk you around the farm a little bit. And we thought, that's great. That's one of the things that we came for. But being that this was a Mennonite family, everywhere you turn, there were a lot of Bible sayings and things. But, she wasn't being, there was nothing where she was trying to convert us or being trying to make anybody feel like you got to be a Christian or anything like that. It's just they were there. This was part of their life, an important part of their life. So we got up the next morning. They warned us about the rooster that they have. Fortunately, the rooster didn't crow, at least not until we were up. But I got up and I had gone out of, the cabin where we were, and I saw this man and I kind of waved. He walked toward me, I walked toward him. It was Rhoda's husband, Thomas. And we got talking. He said, would you like to go for a ride on the combine? I said, great. I mean, what guy doesn't want a chance to be involved with some tractor or truck or whatever? So I said, my wife would like it too, but she's still getting ready. So he said, that's okay, we can only take you one at a time. So I go with him on the combine and we talk about sort of farming and city life in Chicago and crime and, the stuff that he hears on the news. But he was just a wonderful man and we had a great conversation. We come back, Raya's ready for her turn. She gets on the combine. She gets out of the combine. They have started a whole conversation about Judaism and Christianity because Thomas asked, are you from a farm family? And Raya said, no, we're Jewish. We're from the city. Our ancestors probably were all from big cities or little towns, but no, we're not farm people. He said, you're Jewish. Got into a whole big discussion because to the Mennonites, the Jews are very important people. They're people to be honored. They're people to be respected. And, Thomas just couldn't understand what was going on in Israel, why there wasn't more support. And then we got into a little bit of a theological discussion because he asked us about, do we go to services? And fortunately, Raya said no, but I said, yeah, I go every day. He asked about Passover, and Raya said, that's about the Last Supper. That was the meal from the Last Supper. And we got into a discussion around that. And again, it was all because he was curious. He and his wife were curious. And Raya, in, kind of given our history, said, would you like to come for Passover? Thinking, or I thought, he's a farmer. He's not going to come to Chicago. Well, he was very excited about this idea. He said, he and his wife talked about it, and they said, we would love to come. When is it? Raya told them. A couple of days later, we get a text message saying, we'll be there. And we're going to bring our elder or pastor. And we're going to bring our bishop and their wives. So we have a big crowd coming for the first night of Passover. And Rabbi, I'm going to be looking to you for some help between now and then. I have to do the cooking. Well, no, we are going to do the cooking. But, how do we answer questions? Or what kind of resources can we get? Can we, get them here for the first day of Passover for services? There's lots of things that I need to talk to you about. So, if you remember at the beginning, I said there was the podcast we listened to about inviting people for Passover and Shabbat. Well, we had our opportunity to do that and are looking forward to it. So that was a brief tour of the Middle Atlantic states and, Indiana, it's not Middle Atlantic, but our experience on our trip. And if you have any questions later, let me know. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. So I did not know what Alan was going to say specifically, but I had a little bit of a sense of Alan's words. And something that's been on my mind this whole period, which is how our Jewish story always seems to be at the center of everything. And I've been thinking so much about our history of Israel and how grand our stories are. Even the 6-Day War, right? The fear at first and the miraculous victory, or the Yom Kippur War, being attacked on our most sacred day and then coming back. And really all the events of Israeli and of Jewish history always seem to be part of these huge arcs and narratives and larger than life stories, and even the idea of an ancient persecuted nation returning to its ancient homeland. What a story that is. And that we heard from Alan, others feel it too. It's not just us thinking we've got a great story, but the world is obsessed with our story. And sometimes we're the hero and sometimes we're the villain. And I hope we're back to the hero soon at some point. But there's this international clamor for every part of our story, and it just pulls the whole world to watch. And maybe it's a magnetism of a immense story where, as we believe God's hashkacha, God's providence intensifies everything and makes everything larger than life and so big and interesting. And it's really also, we just see in our Parsha this week and in Alan's journey, but Jacob's story is also such a larger than life story. Everything he goes through, all the events of his life, of all the lives in the Torah that we read every week, the good, the bad, the redemptive, everything's a cosmic arc. Everything is bigger than we can imagine. And from the Bible, it's so connected to our kishkas that we call them, right, in our American and Western society, we say, well, that's a biblical story, meaning it has something that draws us from the guts of human existence. And maybe it's not just because of it's literally our cultural heritage that we share, but maybe it's something greater, that it's touching, those stories touch on the very DNA of the universe itself, something about the movements of the cosmos that includes all human beings. Everything Jacob goes through, the struggle with his brother, his twin, whose blessing he steals, and the long years of having to work, as we read today, and not being able to have the love of his life be with him, and all that he goes through, struggling for happiness. And next week, his redemptive moment with the angel, where he's given a new name, Israel, and having reconciliation with Esau. But then again, the trouble with his sons and Joseph and his brothers, and all these incredible, powerful arcs. What does it bring us to? It really brings us to a life of meaning. Right? It brings us to, what does it mean to live a life where we are connecting to those arcs and making them part of how we look at our own lives and part of this world. And part of that lesson is that such a life is not easy. In Jacob's life, it's just not easy. He goes through 21 years of challenges and has to keep asking, who am I? What is my life about? And also, what does this mean? What does every step of this mean in my journey? Trying to ask, who am I throughout all of it? But yeah, what he does have, what we have perhaps, is he has a promise. And that's God's promise to Jacob at the beginning of the Parsha, where God says, I am with you, you will return to the land, and I will not leave you. I will not leave you until that promise is fulfilled. I will not leave you until that promise is fulfilled. And so what Jacob has to do is hold on to all of it, that he goes, hold on to that, and to what he grew up with as he goes through that journey. And maybe there is something of that faith throughout everything in our Jewish history, that difficult narrative that's also riveting, that brings us so much meaning. That's part of our essence in our Jewish journey. And it's so deeply also in Israeliness. And that there's a sense in Israel always that there's a reason that we're back in this land, purpose, and every moment has meaning, and we have to understand it all. And so what was the response to October 7th in Israel? It was really an outpouring, an explosion of love, because people just felt, what do I have to do to respond to this moment? One more chapter in a narrative. And it was almost that people didn't know what to do with themselves, right? 50% of the country volunteered in those first weeks, 50%. And everybody was thinking, how can I turn this horrible moment into an opportunity for growth, into an opportunity for learning, into the next chapter of our story? My brother, who used to be the co-CEO of Israel, as many of you know, an Israeli humanitarian organization, but it's connected to so many young people in Israel. And he said he's part of these WhatsApp groups where there's hundreds of these leaders in Israel, and almost 24/7 trying to find ways to brainstorm how to help the displaced, how to help the army, how to create Israel's narrative and new videos to tell our story. We're such a small people, but how to tell that story, create new paths, and just to find a way forward. And we see it in a March for Israel, which really was about a really horrible thing, about us being attacked, about experiencing anti-Semitism on a level we haven't experienced in so long, about members of our people who are taken hostage in one of the worst conditions we can imagine, how we feel abandoned and alone. But at the same time, the march was really a very positive march amidst all the tears. And everybody felt so uplifted every time someone said, I support you. There was a cheer because we feel, yes, we're going to grow and come out stronger from this chapter because everything has meaning. Every step is taking us towards something. When the artist Matisyahu came on, he was a surprise artist there, and he sang a song about peace, right? One day there'll be no war. And then the words, right? Don't take me soon because I'm here for a reason, and sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let me down. All my life I've been waiting for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars and our children will play. And everybody's saying it with such feeling. I've almost never heard a crowd seize a moment like that and hold on to that sense and that hope for peace. I mean, that's a uniquely Jewish vision that keeps us going, that there's meaning behind every single element of what's happening. And all we have to do is find our self-belief, and that no one can destroy that faith in our story. We can wander around the country and find all the pieces holding it together. Nothing can destroy our faith in our God and our faith in our path. And even as the whole world abandons us for this particular chapter, it doesn't change who we are. And our faith in that promise, the same promise that God made to Jacob, that as long as we live our journey, and sometimes those cosmic arcs are difficult, and sometimes those cosmic arcs are amazing, and sometimes they're challenging, sometimes they're redemptive, but there's somehow a purpose throughout all of it, the fate that we can't always see, but that we keep asking and thinking, well, what is it about? And we keep pushing and believing that one day we'll realize that we ourselves made another entry in that biblical book, and that we ourselves are worthy descendants of those who created chapters before us, and that we too have engraved another page in our people's story and emerge, God willing, a new name and a new beginning. Shabbat Shalom.